I deal with all the architectural. Sorry, I deal with all the architectural and the permit drawings with the city. So basically, how I'm helping the investors to do anything with the city regulations and such, in terms of the permits, engineering, and everything involved in between. Now, in terms of like how I started off, I started my career back in 2017 dealing with custom homes and house additions and sort of residential side. And I did a lot of my work here in Ontario, specifically in Oakville at the start. Meanwhile, while I was doing custom homes, I also worked on apartment buildings from the 50 plus units with Taco from Talk About Investing. So we did a lot of those unit conversions, unit upgrades. You know, anytime one of our investors bought a building, that's where we were at the first day from start to finish.
Yeah.
And from there, you know, that was more of a side hustle versus my full time job. So while I'm working on at the daytime custom homes, at nighttime I was working real estate investment projects. And then from there, I slowly started building up my career in architecture while also doing real estate on the side until around COVID happened. And at that time, I had the decision to either stay with the team I was with at that time. It was a massive, what was it, apartment building company called Achilles, who buys apartment buildings in the Europe, US, and Canada. So they were global wide. But we were only doing the design part. I had no relations to the construction side until Taco brought me onto his team, and I started doing all the construction business on his team there for a good amount of time, actually. So for me, it was a good understanding of trying to understand the construction side, not just what's on paper. And this is where I feel like a lot of people need to understand too. You can't just stay within your own lane. You need to have a good understanding of like how your team operates too, from your accountant, the lawyer, your agent, your designer and contractor. You don't
Yeah.
have to know everything, but you have to have a good understanding of where they're coming from and how they operate. So working
Yeah.
on the construction side definitely helped me understand like it's not an easy job. Construction is so out there. It's like you have to understand from a day-to-day job. Like it took me, even myself being in the architectural field, it took me quite a bit of time to understand every little thing they do is such a big thing in the long game. So that's really until I got into the construction side, I went back into real estate and started doing my own firm. And even today, right now, we're still working with Taco and his team and other investors on the multifamily side. So I've been in this for about maybe 3 years, give or take, on the multifamily, but I'm working in real estate for the last 7 years.
Amazing, amazing. And what we do, Henry, there is a ritual before you should start your amazing mastermind. We do a picture session. So if everyone can, come on camera for a minute. And Jason, you want to
Yeah.
share something? Meanwhile,
Oh, people with camera. I was going to say it was great to meet Henry in person. It was great. He has great style. It was great in the other day in Taco's event, and
yes,
excited to hear. He showed me a little bit and what he was doing on the side there, and I only had a brief moment, but so excited to show you guys today, share with you guys today.
yes. And Andrew, Pedro, if you don't mind, if you're comfortable, we can go for
I
30
don't have
seconds.
my you guys. I don't even have a suit jacket. I don't have a sweater. I feel underdressed like you guys up there.
No, it's just to cover my t-shirt. That's all.
I think Monil's going to join, so let's get Monil
Yes,
on camera.
we're waiting for Monil. And Andrew, Pedro, Monil, if you guys can show your amazing, handsome faces, we can take the picture. Perfect. Nice, Pedro.
Oh, I think Monil's coming on now.
Yes, Monil is set. Andrew, I'm not sure if you're there. Maybe he's with family.
Yeah, that's good.
So, okay. I think 1, 2, 3, smile. Perfect. Awesome. Okay, over to you, Henry.
Right.
The stage is yours.
Perfect. So just so I understand, Suman, do I share my screen with my presentation,
Yep,
or you
you
guys?
can you can share the screen. That's perfectly fine. You
Oh,
have
okay.
the access. Just check if you can.
Okay. Let me just take a second to set that up.
No problem. That's fine. And just for people, who have joined us, today's it's going to be about the six-step value add formula, and mostly in the multifamily space. So it's going to be a pretty value add session. So over to you, Henry.
Perfect. Appreciate it. Well, number one thing is I want to say thank you to Suman and Jason for, it was great meeting you guys again at the Grow event last Friday. Appreciate you guys taking the time to come out. It was a great collaboration. So I appreciate you guys coming out and even bringing me along here. I know I chatted a little bit at the event, but I want to go in more detail today, especially the six-step formula that I think a lot of investors would appreciate a little bit more. because we have a lot of times the investors are looking into the deals, the number run-ins, and everything else before they actually purchase the property, which is fine. But a lot of times we're seeing a lot of our investors, even the newer ones, having difficulties after they received a deal, and then what do they do after? From the permits, the city inspections and constructions, like that's a different ball game than just running the numbers and dealing with the deals and everything. So what I've created here was a 6-step formula trying to help investors understand that part of the project, also including like, when you find a deal. So this 6-step formula should help you understand from start to finish how you can put everything together in one place. So hopefully this can help you understand everyone's point of view. And believe me, I am open to feedback too. If I miss anything or any sort of specific details, I didn't want to put too much, consultants on this just to make sure I don't overwhelm everyone at once. But we can definitely take some time afterwards to discuss if you have any questions. So let's get started. So let me check here. So a little bit about myself. I know I explained a little bit for the people who are already here, but for the people who just entered, number one thing is I'm a networking nerd. As people in the room can already tell you, they see me in some other events. I I strongly believe in your network is your net worth. I personally go to as many REI events as much as possible all over Ontario. I've been to the Sudbury REI's events. I've been in Niagara, Windsor, over the GTA area. And if you're not from Canada, it's these are like 2-hour distances from my own place. So I make the time and effort to go to these events and try to learn from as much as possible. Again, there's no way out there is going to know everything, but once you go to these events and start talking to people, you start learning at least one little takeaway from that night. So I think it's most valuable. Back to my career here, I've been in architecture and real estate for about 7 years. As I mentioned before, I started doing custom homes and apartment buildings back in, I believe, 2017 at this point now. Custom homes at the daytime and then apartment buildings at night. And then from there, I slowly build up my career and the buildings and projects that we are working on. I worked as a construction project manager for Taco and talk about his team there for about a good year and a half to understand that side of business. And it goes back to my point of trying to see if you can understand from everybody's point of view. You don't have to understand the full amount, but as long as you understand a good portion of it, you should be able to see where they're coming from in terms of the cost, timing, and their service that they're providing. I run an architecture firm here in Mississauga, Ontario. We have now just opened another office in Hamilton, Ontario, with some of our other fellow REI investors there. And I've worked on projects from like duplex conversions all the way up to 100 plus apartment buildings. Now, I know that seems like a long range, but we seem to like adjust to our investors. We have investors, our long-term investors buying buildings on the monthly basis. And then we have new investors coming to us for their small duplex, triplex, fourplex conversions. So we try to attend to as many people as we can. And that's why we're able to go to many distances in the area from like 2-hour drive to like 3-hour drive. Doesn't matter. We go where investors are because we understand that the numbers make sense in those areas. And the last thing about me, so far up to today, we've completed over 500 investment units in Ontario, from duplexes to 100 plus units. And I'm pretty sure I'm pretty confident that we know what we're doing here. But it's always interesting to understand from other designers and architects where they're coming from. So I'm not, I'm not the person who knows everything, but I always learn something from these discussions.
And only Ontario focused, right, Henry? Like just Ontario.
Mhm.
Okay.
So we've done some projects in what do you call it? In Ottawa, Montreal, those type of areas outside kind of our comfort zone. What was it? I believe it was a hotel a few years ago was Taco we were working on. Um, didn't know too much about that one. We were just retained to do some of the designs there and splitting up the hotels into multiple residential units. But since for maybe about a few months, we haven't got too much updates on that. But anyways, yeah, it just depends on the property it is. If you're asking me to go all the way to like Alberta for a basement apartment, I probably won't go. It's a little bit outside. But it depends on the opportunity there. We have some people in the Calgary area actually inviting me to check out their apartment buildings in that city. So I'm interested to kind of take a plane and see how that city operates in terms of the city building codes and everything involved.
And Henry, maybe one quick follow-up question. I think people are already getting interest in the session. So Kazi is asking, have you done any projects or plan to do anything in the Kingston, Ontario region? Or are you open for Kingston projects?
So I am open for Kingston projects. We have a very strong connection with an REI designer in that area. She's great at
Nice.
what she does, and she's been even she and I chat a little bit from time to time about that area versus like the GTA Hamilton area and where we can kind of either collaborate or work together on. So
Okay.
I've been familiarizing myself with the Kingston sort of bylaws and building codes in that area to see if there is potential there for myself to be involved. So yeah, it's definitely open for discussion.
And is it, Kazi is asking, is it Lisa Henderson or someone else?
Yes, yes. So he
Okay,
knows who exactly
amazing.
what I'm talking about. Yes, we
Okay,
actually had
amazing.
her
Yeah,
at our Discord podcast a few months ago, actually. So she and I had a very long video chat about everything in Kingston in her area. So if you guys are
awesome.
interested in that, it's on our YouTube link on Grow. So we had a
Okay.
nice 3 hour chat actually. So it's pretty interesting.
Amazing. And for folks, those who don't know, we have a great, amazing Grow Network Discord community as well, where they do a lot of live events too. So definitely, check out with Henry for the Grow Network as well.
Perfect. Sounds good. So next part, we'll get into the juice of this whole meeting here, but let's start with a 6-step value add. And I created this a while back and finally got into motion a few days ago, a few weeks ago, give or take. But the first step when you're looking to a project or you're a new investor or even seasonal expert looking into this, number one is obviously find the deal. And what I mean by that is, from what you understand from other coaching sessions and other people in your network, it's the area that makes a difference. You got to work with our wholesale, realtors, checking if it's an ABC type of area because that affects your construction rate. You don't want to give them an A plus quality for a C type of area, right? And you have to understand, like, if you're buying for the cheap and you understand this neighborhood's not as valuable as like the A plus area, why are you overspending on that? And that's a lesson I even got to learn myself from some of my properties when I bought it back in 2021. Right, it was like a B minus type of area, but I was getting A plus effort, and honestly, it wasn't worth the return. And even Taco warned me about that. And again, this is where you trial and error type of thing, right? So nobody's perfect. We're all trying to learn, and as much as we can, we're trying to learn from each other, right? So knowing your area that you're trying to invest in is number one key, right? Talk to the people in that area, speak to some wholesalers, some realtors, some of your coaches that who buy in that area and see where the value is, especially specific neighborhoods. I've seen it before where one side of the neighborhood is a lot different than the other side and greatly affects your ROI there. There's a reason why it's a lot cheaper on one side of the tracks than the other. So be careful about that and, work with somebody local in that area to see what the potentials are. I personally work with people who most of the time they're born and raised in that area. So they understand how the city has evolved over the span of like 20 years. So they're the best people to kind of work with to understand where I should spend my money into. And then the second step, and again, Sumit, you guys can stop me anytime if you have any questions.
Okay.
But yeah, so the second step here, and I think people are going to be a little bit curious about, is the zoning information. So
Yep.
how it usually works is that some of our investors are coming to us, call in, text in, DM in, asking me about, Henry, I have a property I'm interested in. I'm looking to see if what we could add to this property. So in terms of zoning. So it's a very key word you have to understand in terms of talking to the city. So when you look into a property, you type in the address, you type in the city. For example, if you're looking in Hamilton area or whichever city you're working in, you type in city of Hamilton, city of Toronto, zoning interactive map is the keyword, and they will guide you to an online map where you type in the address of the property you're looking at, and it will pop in something similar to what the screenshot shows here, a zoning map that will tell you exactly what that property is zoned under. And if you look closely at this map here, you'll see, even though it's in the same neighborhood, we have 3 or 4 or 5 different zonings in this one neighborhood. So just because the property you're looking at has one zone doesn't mean your neighbors have the exact same zone. And that's where a lot of investors are misunderstanding that and losing on potential cash flow or appreciation. Because now, because it doesn't fall under the same zone as they assume it was, because I thought my neighbors had the same zone, now they have to go through a rezoning process with the city, which involves thousands of dollars, 6 to 12 months delay, and just add into your project that you need to if you had searched up the zoning information properly the first time. So a lot of investors are kind of concerned about that. So what they do is they text me, message me to say, can you do the zoning information on this? Can you triple check it for me just to make sure we're all on the same page? I do that for them. Sometimes it's as easy as going on the website and reading through their bylaws, or it's as difficult as going in person to the city and discussing with one of their zoning staff, which again, their zoning staff, you know, as much as educated as they are, it's also open to discussion to them, right? Just because they read something differently doesn't mean I have to read the same way, right? It's all interpretation. And this you'll see that word kind of pop up a little bit in this meeting, because the zoning and building code is all interpretation. A lot of it solely relies on how you're reading it and how they're reading it, and even how the city operates. A lot of cities, even though it's the Ontario building code, doesn't mean they all follow the same sort of standards. And one example is the zoning sort of bylaws there, where one city would allow you to do parking anywhere, and the other city would only allow you to do parking on the front side. So does that affect your ROI? It might, but it also could cause you like to do more work than you had originally thought. So what I like to do is I like to look at the bylaws. It's a 500-page document in most cities, and try to see where the fine print says. Right? We've had deals like fall out just because the one specific line says we can't do something without spending thousands of dollars, and so we have to move away from that project and look at another deal. So that's where we kind of come in and help them understand that the zoning. But again, you guys are more than open to look into the zoning. And I'll repeat myself: type in the city, type in the zoning interactive map, look into the zoning bylaws, read through as much as you can to understand how the city operates.
Yeah,
Okay.
Henry, oh, go ahead.
Kazi has a question.
Sure.
Kazi, go ahead.
Hey, Henry, this is a good start. I've done quite a few duplex conversion in city of Kingston. And actually, Lisa did a few of my design as well. I'm an engineering background. I manage projects. And when I work with realtor, if this realtor guys, if they're really savvy for 20, 30 years, they're in the business, but they may be showing the investors, if they're not familiar with the zoning, some of the areas in Kingston that absolutely cannot do the duplex conversion and all that. And they could be buying the property knowing that it may not work. I used to actually call the city, knowing that zoning and interactive map and on top of it, more so about for the planning purpose because of the vehicle, how many vehicles, for the duplex units you're going to have. It is very tricky sometimes. So what I used to do, if I'm thinking about buying something, then I used to send an email to the city planners to say, hey, could you check it out for me, this one here? So I actually built that kind of relationship. They used to come to me and says, yeah, I think it might work, but we still need to do a formal assessment in order for you to give me the good answers, at least to give you some help on that, in addition to what Lisa was working for me. So I thought they're just going to bring it for this audience here.
No, 100%. And there are some cities that will take your phone call and give you a straight answer or somewhat of a guidance there. Unfortunately, a lot of cities we're working in, the Hamilton, Toronto, even like the Niagara area, they don't take the phone calls as easily as that, right? So majority of the time, I do have to go in person to kind of explain to them what we're planning to do and if this is allowed based on my reading of the bylaws, right? Because of course, I want to do my homework and say, okay, you know what, this looks good, but let me double check or triple check with the city to see we're on the same page. Now, the difficult part is to understand that the city has been overwhelmed with work and they've been hiring a lot of people in the last year, 2 years, give or take. And a lot of these new people are still learning the zoning bylaws or even the building code. So it is open to discussion. It's never really a final say on their part, which is difficult when you're trying to get an answer before you buy the deal, right? So what we've done before in the past too with some of our investors is actually how it works. And how do I explain this properly here? We go through a condition on the closing where we try to go through a zoning certification with the city. So we're going to show them the drawings, telling them we're going to do a duplex, triplex, fourplex, whatever conversion it is. And through that zoning review with the city, which could take up to like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, they'll let us know if what we're planning is feasible or we have to go through minor variants, committee of adjustments, or worse, right? And we'll have that in the condition as part of our deal to say if the city comes back to us positive, we'll close on a deal. But if not, we're just going to get out of this deal right away and move on to the next one. Now, of course, there are some fees associated with that when it comes to the city fees, the designer's fees. But really, other than that, you're really just spending a little bit of amount to try to close on that deal for this potential value add for this building. So it seems to be working the last couple months that we've been experimenting with, right? Now, some investors don't like to go that route and just say they want to get a firm answer, which again, it's my job to kind of educate you guys that the city is very vague in what they suggest, right? I can't guarantee you an answer because I don't know who's going to be on the other side. I know a lot of people on the city side, but again, with all the hires that they're going through and the turnover that they're going through, I'm almost dealing with a new person every single time. So it's difficult on my part to work together with the city because of the new blood that keeps coming up. But no, it's great. It's great that Kingston actually answers the phone calls. No, I appreciate that. I want to keep that in mind too. I don't have to drive all the way there to get an answer, right? But
yeah, sorry, I was gonna ask a question too, and I'm not sure if it's a zone, maybe you know or not. I heard something about the Innkeepers Act, and I don't know if that's a zone or is it like and I guess it's called an act, right? Where it's more so because in my Ontario strategy is more like midterm, short-term stuff. But anyways, I've seen some properties where it's either the zoned or noted as innkeeper. Have you heard of that before? And do you know anything about that?
Innkeeper, I personally haven't heard about that zone specifically. Like, which city are you referring to mostly?
So it's mostly like East End stuff. I mean, I've seen in more rural, right, for out suburban stuff where I think it's not subjected to the landlord tenant, oversight, right? So you can evict people because it's a zoned or identified as innkeeper. But anyways, it's outside this conversation. That's fine. I was just curious to know if you heard of it before.
No, but now I'm curious. I'm going to look into that actually.
Yeah,
That's,
we'll talk
yeah,
after
that's,
this. Yeah.
yeah, we'll definitely chat about that one. Actually, yeah, that's interesting. Well, again, there's so many different zonings from different
Yeah,
cities,
I was just wondering.
right? But no, I'm curious to see how that actually operates. But yeah,
Sure.
okay. So, continuing on to this whole checking the zoning, it just doesn't rely just on zoning. Keep in mind of we had to look into conservation, heritage, and even of course the parking we already brought up. But I want to dive a little bit into that specific. Conservation is really anytime you're near water, like a ravine or a lake or a stream, any that type of features near your property is going to trigger conservation. And the issue with conservation is that they don't have any sort of formal guidelines. Like there's a building code, there's a zoning code. They have it in black and white ink, what they specifically want. The conservation is really you're giving them a design and like hoping to God that they agree with your design, they like it, they love it, they'll approve of it, or they hate it and they'll just reject it because of so many different comments. So it's really like a big deal for us if we find our property under conservation. Right away we like at least in my investor group we try to run away from that and go on to the next deal because we know 90% of the time they won't accept multifamily. And even recently we had a what was it 3 townhouses in Chatham area where it was treated like a triplex because it's like side by side, but the owners wanted to do all their basements into 3 separate units. But because it was against like a lake, it fall under conservation, and conservation denied it completely. There's no ands, if or buts. We tried fighting them for a good month, and they just rejected everything. So the investor decided to sell that property because they couldn't do any sort of investment projects in the basement area. So it really does hurt when you are under conservation. So keep that in mind. There is an online map on Ontario Conservation's .ca, I believe. You can check there if your property does fall under that. And if it does, double check with the city and the conservation in that area to see if what you're doing will trigger any sort of conservation permits. Okay. The next one I want to bring up is heritage, because this is very common with some of our projects we're doing in Hamilton area, in the downtown area, or any downtown area you're going to be dealing with in any city. There's a lot of heritage value there that they've built up for so many decades. They don't want to lose that. So with a lot of our multifamily projects, a lot of the heritage value we had to keep on the exterior side. While they don't care too much about the interior work that's going on, they do care a lot about the outside. Like if you need a brand new window for the new bedroom, or you're converting a whole basement to a new unit, the windows in the basement need to be in line with the existing windows, right? If there's any cracks or damage to the exterior of the heritage building, you have to repair that for the heritage permit. But luckily, there are some cities that give you grants for these heritage upgrades. So we just dealt with one not too far from Hamilton, where we would have to spend about $40,000 in heritage costs, and the heritage department was going to fund almost all of it, up to $30,000, I believe. So even though it sounds expensive at first, double check with a heritage department in your city if they would fund it. We actually had to get the heritage staff to meet us on site to evaluate the entire building before we even bought it. So they're willing to do that much. So double check with your guys. These are the type of people you want to be there as when you're reviewing a building at that level. You're the city staff, your designer, your contractor, your agent, everyone of your power team should be there when you first view the project. And then lastly, minor variance can be of adjustments. For those who don't know, there are the zoning bylaws you have to meet, but if you can't meet those zoning bylaws, you have to go through a minor variance process, which is basically asking the city permission to go against the zoning bylaws. Right now, while it sounds minor in by nature, it's really a long and tedious process. So we try to avoid as much as possible and making sure our project doesn't need that sort of variance. And that's what the zoning review is for. When you go through the zoning review, the city will tell you, hey, listen, Henry, you have to go through minor variance, or you can keep it, or you can adjust it a little bit to make sure it doesn't need it. So it's up to you to decide, if you want to take that route. We had situations in the past where we had to go to a minor variance to add like a fifth unit onto a property. And it was fairly simple. It was honestly just trying to get that fifth unit onto this one property that wasn't going to make or break the deal, but it would give us some more profits at the end of the day. So again, running your numbers to make sure, is it worth holding the property for another 6 months for that fifth unit? Does it make sense for you, right? What other costs are associated to that? The city fees is like 4,000. The planners are like an extra 10,000, right? So double check your numbers and even ask the designer or whoever's part of your team to see what alternatives routes you can take. And then lastly, parking, of course, this is a tricky one. And I just had a meeting with somebody right before this one. But if you buy a property, I always recommend asking the other side's realtors or lawyers, or your lawyer, sorry, about the legal land survey. Okay. When you buy a property, that current owner should have a copy of the legal land survey that shows the property lines. So you understand what part of the building and the exterior features are yours. And how that's important is that we have to put in, or on the drawings, the parking spaces. Now, for example, we had situations where we had houses and buildings that have a long driveway, no sidewalk to the street, and the legal land survey said, our lot line was so close to our house that we didn't have room to actually put parking spaces. Even though physically we can fit in like 4 different cars, legally we shouldn't be able to fit any cars. So when we went through like planning and zoning, they rejected us there, and we had to go through minor variance. Even though physically we could fit in 4 cars, it doesn't make sense. But on paper, that's what you need to understand. So I highly recommend speaking to your agents and your lawyers. Get that legal survey, understand where your boundaries are, because if you're trying to do a duplex, triplex, fourplex, you're going to need parking space, and that's going to affect it, right? But moving on from that, if nobody else has any questions.
Kazi, I think, sorry, Kazi has one question. Kazi, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so it's called a cut permit or so. I know in Kingston we can do tandem parking. Other municipality, they're probably not going to allow that. So if you're still kind of limited with your tandem parking and you're not going to go over your sidewalk or any of that nature, would you be able to do the cut permit to expand on a little bit, still within your allocation, the 40% or whatnot?
Yes, you are. So that's a good question, because somebody asked me that yesterday too. We had enough room for like a tandem, but we didn't have enough room on the width. So we can do that. It's just another permit at the end of the day. But because it's another permit, we have to have the legal land survey, and we have to measure that area of where we're cutting. So getting that documentation is so important and crucial when you're doing that part. But yeah, so the issue with a road cut permit is, of course, you're extending your own driveway, but you're extending the city side curb. So they want to make sure everything is done according to their standards. And a lot of times, anything outside your lot line, the city's own contractors will do that work. Obviously, you pay them, but they're doing anything outside the lot line. Similar to like when you upgrade a water system, the water line from your side, you pay for that, and anything after that, the city pays for that fee.
Yeah, and on top of it, the city of Kingston, at least, they want to have 1.2 meter from the road, what is it called? The road line all the way in the back, if you happen to have an entrance on the side or in the back. So it's not just suffice to say that I'm just going to park 2 cars in tandem, but in the event of any emergency, they want to make sure that while you park 2 cars, you got to have 1.2 meter alongside, whether you want to enter on the from the back or from the side. So I don't know other municipality have that kind of rules or not.
It's funny because like somebody, I believe one of our designers, his name is Michael. He's doing some projects in the Kitchener, Cambridge area, and he assumed the same thing as you did, like the 4 feet plus the parking. But after some conversation during was inspector, we found out we didn't have to do that. So they would account in the entire space as a 4 feet. They wouldn't make you do 4 feet plus the parking. The whole thing was included. Now, as odd as that is, it did save them some costs in terms of like expanding that driveway. So it did work out at the end. But not knowing that during the examination and the review session was difficult because they were one track mind at that time.
Yeah.
So the rationale was that if you happen to park 2 cars and you have a narrow space, you don't have a 1.2 meter, somebody have to get access to the emergency with the stretcher and all that. You don't have 1.2 meter to go in the back of the property to rescue somebody.
Yeah, no, I understand the logic there, and we can do that. That's great, but we have to understand there are some properties out there that don't have that clearance, right? Like, there's no way we can actually fit in a car and 4 feet, even in the downtown area. Like, a lot of my projects are in the Hamilton downtown, and they are like maybe 6 feet apart, right? It's like you can barely fit a car in if you can. You can't fit in 4 extra feet, so it definitely comes down to like what's more feasible at that point, right?
Yeah, and on top of it, these guys are asking for bike lane too.
I've seen that a lot of times. We're working on a building in Toronto where they would what was it? They would exchange some parking spaces for bike spaces. But the tricky part here was they wanted the bike spaces secure inside the building, not outside, because they're afraid of theft, right? So we want you to build an actual bike room inside the property. So imagine not being able to do one more unit because you have to put a bike room inside your property. So that definitely affects your ROI. This is what I mean about looking into the zoning bylaws, because there's that one little thing that could definitely affect your ROI or make or break that deal. So getting that first step is crucial to your whole project. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to go into step 3 here of the 6-step value add and running the numbers. Okay, so the first step, finding the deal. Then we're going to look into actually checking the zoning. So once you get those 2 checked off, you find a deal, the zoning makes sense. Now you're going to run some numbers. Okay. And then what I mean by run some numbers, you guys have your own pro forma sheets or Excel sheets that you guys use. From there, you work with somebody like myself or a contractor or somebody else who's familiar with the field, who understands the soft cost versus hard cost type of situation, right? Because a lot of people would combine the renovation costs with the soft costs and assume 150, 200,000, whichever it is the amount. But to me, as an investor, I would like to understand how that renovation cost is divided. Now, we don't have to get too specific in like every kitchen cabinet or every door handle, but I like to understand how much is framing cost, how much is drywall, how much is electrical, and then how much is the architecturals and engineers and the city fees, right? You have to truly understand your numbers there to see if it makes sense for you, right? As investors, we need to like look at every single, line item there. Now, I mentioned a couple of them here, the architecturals, engineers. There's also consultant fees. And how that's different is that we sometimes work with planners, urban land planners who actually deal with minor variance applications and community adjustments, or we have heritage consultants who deal with, of course, the heritage. And now we're even exploring the traffic study analysis people, where even though we don't have enough parking, we have a parking study developed to show the city that, listen, we don't have enough parking, but there's enough transit in the area to support adding 2 more units to this building. It's not going to break the building. It's not going to break the economy in that area. Like, we can actually put in 2 more units without adding parking, and they have transit all over to support them and make them go anywhere around the city. So it's important to understand like there are more than one consultant involved in your project, especially if you're doing land development, which is a totally different topic. We can talk about that in another event, but there's so many other consultants involved in that this is like minor in nature, right? And then the next fees is the permit fees, because a lot of people, what they don't understand is like there's building permit fees, there's a zoning fee, there's additional permit fees if the project's taking too long. So believe it or not, if the examiner is taking too long or it's a very complex project, they will charge you extra amount for the review time, which has happened to me a couple times actually, that they assume it was a simple triplex conversion and then they figure out it's a lot more complicated in nature once they got their hands on it. Okay. But the biggest red flag here on this list, I want you guys to kind of understand, is development charges. This is probably the scariest thing in terms of their soft cost, because it definitely makes or break the deal in terms of adding another like 50,000 to your project. So what I mean by that is, like, let's say in Hamilton, we don't have to pay development charge up to 3 units. So if you do a triplex in Hamilton, no development charges. Once you do the 4th unit, because you are allowed to do up to 4 units in Hamilton, now you're paying like 50,000 in development charge for just that 4th unit. Okay. And some cities, we're also doing multifamily, obviously, conversions there where we're paying per unit. But that doesn't really hit us as hard because we're doing so many more units in a building that already has 20 units. We can kind of accommodate and adjust for that. When we're dealing with fourplex, and this 50,000 is taking away like more than like half our soft cost fees, that's a big deal there. So just be careful when you're looking into conversions. What are the development charges? Does it have parkland fees? Because that's a separate fee. Does it have education fees? If it's a Catholic or public school, there's 2 different fees there. And if it's suburbs or rural, that's a different fee as well. So there's so many different fees when it comes to city. They want their portion as well. So keep that in mind when you're looking at conversions. It definitely is a big bill to pay at the end. And they will. Yep.
Sorry, one question. So now when I believe like these fees is kind of going to be taken care by, like guided by like you and kind of people who understand the renovation game even better, right? Like, so when you run the numbers, I'm assuming you are working with realtor, wholesaler, yourself, and also the renovation experts, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we're running these numbers, like how we kind of set it up right now is, similar to what you said. We're working with a wholesaler or realtor and a contractor to kind of understand, hey guys, here's the fee breakdown from like hard costs, soft costs, and everything else involved, and how everything is broken down. So at the end of the day, we're going to give you some sort of a few document sheets to show everything involved in that.
Yeah.
And this is the project that you want to go with. It's going to have one big fat number at the end, but at least you understand where that number comes from, right? It's like, Henry, why is it so expensive? Well, here's why. The development charges are 50,000, right? The kitchen is going to be 20,000, right? And engineering consultant is going to be another 15,000, right? Now, can we save on some of this stuff? We could. Just depends on the consultants and their level. And here's how some investors have gone about that. They want to go with their friend's engineer or somebody else they know. And to me, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because you're working with somebody that's great, you can trust them, but they're not real estate investor focused. Like, they don't understand the urgency that we need to do this today. We need this stuff done today, because your holding cost is going to still be holding there. You already bought the building. You need this guy to work on this today or as fast as possible, right? So sometimes the consultants, engineers, designers that some people work with aren't or understand that level of commitment, right? So we can save on costs, but it's going to come at a cost there, right?
Got it. Perfect.
Okay. So part of this whole thing is the rental income, bachelors versus 1-bedroom, 2 bedrooms. That also affects your development charge. Okay. A lot of cities, how they've broken it down is that bachelors and 1-bedrooms are going to be this amount, and then 2 bedrooms plus are going to be a different amount. So while you get more rent from the 2-bedroom units, it may not help if you're paying so much more for it. So a lot of investors have either split up, like maybe half the units we're going to do are 2 bedrooms and half the units 1 bedroom, or just do all of them 1 bedrooms and bachelors, just to make sure their development charge is not as much as it would have been, right? So keep that in mind too. Unit layouts do matter. Number of units do matter in terms of development charge.
Yeah.
And it definitely affects the numbers there.
And the development charges goes to the city, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The city.
So you are quite literally delivering a fat check to the city in person.
Wow.
Here you go. Take my money.
That's a huge check.
It's
for the fourth unit.
But we're at their mercy. That's the thing, because we have a couple permits right now that are done, but the investor needs to deliver them a check. Like, they won't accept e-transfers or online payments. You as the investor and homeowner have to go there in person, deliver the check. And once they review it and prove it after a few days, then they'll give us the permits, right?
Okay. And if we are already like kind of doing a land development for more than 5 units and all, so I'm assuming the development charges here is applicable as well, or?
Yes. So the development charges are for any brand new units that you're adding to the property. So for
Okay.
conversions, it's like it was built to be a single family home and
Yeah.
you're adding like 4 units to it, then yeah, development charges would be applicable. There are some cities that would waive it, right? Toronto, I
Yeah.
believe it waives up to 4 units. Don't quote me that. I believe it's up to 4 units.
Yeah.
Hamilton waives up to 3 units. And a lot of cities waive it up to like 2 units. Like I believe Weldon waives it for the first unit. And
So
in the third unit, they charge.
if we buy a land where it's kind of zoned for more units than 4, uh, still the development charge will be 50K, or it changes per unit, it's
It's per
50,000
unit. It's per
per
unit.
unit. Wow.
So imagine like 50,000 per unit. The 50,000 for the 4th unit scenario I mentioned was just because it's the 4th new unit,
Yeah.
right? But normally it is per unit, right? If you're doing,
Wow.
yeah, in your example, land development for 5 units, you're paying, and again, it's probably not going to be 50,000. It's probably going to be a little bit less,
Yeah.
but it's per unit. So if it's 30,000 times 5, you're already looking at like 150,
Wow. Nice.
right?
Good to know.
No, well, this is why a lot of land developers are trying to add as many units as they can
Yeah.
because they understand that there's obviously going to be development charges, but the construction is going to be reduced because there's so many of the same units. You're buying
Yeah.
in
Makes
volume,
sense.
right? So
Makes sense.
there's a reason why a lot of people don't do a lot of the missing middle buildings, which is like,
Yeah.
the 20 units, the 10 units, the 15 units. It
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. They're losing money at that point,
Yeah. And I think
right?
one more question I'll take on behalf of Kazi is, he wanted to check for appraisal fees and PM fees. So I'm assuming here, whatever you have shown, these are just some few examples, and there are
Mhm.
more fees too as well, right? Or
Yeah, so the appraiser fees, and this is how it works with appraisers too, because we were in the middle of buying a building a few months ago too. So what the appraiser was trying to do was he wanted to get the existing drawings to see what's there, and then wanted to propose drawings to see what we're proposing, the ARV value of that.
yeah.
So I believe that appraiser for commercial was around the 4 or 5,000 mark, which if you are looking to get the numbers for, as is value and the ARV, you're going to be paying that amount. But you just want to know the value of today's market, it's going to be a little bit cheaper, like I think the 3,000 mark,
Okay.
right?
Makes sense.
But I suggest trying to get the ARV value there just because now you understand, hey, I have the drawings, I know what I'm going to do, and this is what the value of the building is going to be after we get through all this like headache.
Okay. Makes sense.
Okay. And then not to take up too much time here, but the rebates, of course, you have to check with your the HVAC guys who are giving rebates for like the heat pump systems there, right? And even the MY Select program as well for commercial buildings, right? They're trying to meet their checklist. And from the MY Select program, how it works is that as long as you're doing 40% better than like the National Building Code of 2015, you get 100 points from that, and then you get the 95 loan to value, 50 years amortization rates. You get all the benefits to that, right? And the best way to get to that 40% is definitely trying to get the engineers to do their own analysis of the building. And the only way to get that is to get the drawings. So everything goes back to the drawings to see how that system and how that proposal works at the end of the day. Okay.
Nice.
And yeah, the energy and removing the gas system is a pretty common place here, where a lot of the buildings that we're looking at, the existing buildings, are all, boiler developed or boiler built, and we're trying to remove that and build in like the heat pumps or any sort of energy efficiency models there. So definitely look into your building and seeing how else you can make it more energy efficient is a key, because you don't want to do affordability and you don't want to do accessibility. Doesn't make sense if you can get all the energy upgraded. Perfect. Okay, so moving on to step 4. So you got the deal, you checked the zoning, you've run the numbers, the deal makes sense, you're going to buy it. Now, as soon as you make the offer and they've accepted it, now you have your due diligence phase, where in the due diligence phase, part of your phase there, you can go into and inspect the buildings a number of times, like 2, 3, 5 different times. And from there, we can actually I can actually go with you and measure the entire building, right? Depends on what it is. It could be a single family, it could be an entire building. I just need like 20 minutes, 30 minutes at max to scan the whole thing. We're not measuring it, we're actually scanning it. So it makes a faster process. So while you're looking at the other items, like with your electrician, your contractor, your agents, I'm going to be doing my thing, or your designer is going to be doing their thing and measuring the units as much as possible. So just in case, if you retain them and you are serious about this building, they can start the drawing process while you're in your closing phase. So in the perfect world, we're trying to get the drawings completed before the closing date, which could be 30, 60, 90 days, however you structure that, and submit it under the current owner's name so we can hopefully get permits by your closing date. So as soon as you get the keys in your hand, you start renovations ASAP. That's the idea. Now, a lot of times that's not really the case because the city's backlog, or you're not too confident in the deal while you're reviewing all the due diligence paperwork, right? So there's a lot of things that could slow down that process, but that is the end goal, to start renovation first day, have permits by the closing date, and making sure everything's on schedule there. Now, during the whole due diligence phase, depending on what you're doing with the unit conversions, we've had clients who want to do unit conversions, but also want to do like an addition to the property. So like a rear side addition. Henry, this building's only like 1,000 square feet. I want to double that, make a rear side addition. I want to put 2 bedrooms into it. Well, now we're affecting the grading. Now we need a topographic survey. Now we need so much more drawings and engineering than we maybe originally thought. So a lot of times when you're trying to get to that level of renovations, I'm going to be there to kind of help you explain, is this really what you want to do for this building that, you know, you're trying to either flip or you're trying to hold midterm and just keep it as an Airbnb or something. It depends on your investment goals. A lot of times people just want to renovate it and either Airbnb it or flip it. And, you know, that's a different goal and strategy than doing long-term rentals. So understanding that's key point here.
I4 has one question, Henry. I4,
Sure.
if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to know, Henry, how do they calculate the efficiency when you do the criteria of high efficiency, right? How do they calculate it?
So the engineers actually have to have, like, per MI Select program, the engineers have to have an analysis program to evaluate the drawings and do like a 3D energy modeling analysis there and provide that sheet and document to MI Select for them to review it. Like you can't just be using some random software. MI Select has specific softwares that the engineers have to use to get them the numbers that they need to prove it. Now, the name of that software, I have to recall, I have to double check it, but basically it's on the engineer to provide that information. Now, the first step into that is that you hire an energy auditor to go into your existing building, and they'll see how low your energy ratings are. And they'll provide you solutions. Hey, listen, Henry, maybe if you add insulation to the attic and insulation to the basement and a few heat pumps, you can get to that 40% rule, right? So they'll give you a checklist of like, here's some suggestions. You can choose whichever one you want, as long as you have proof backing it up from the engineer to say it's going to be over 40%.
Thank you, Henry.
Perfect. Okay. Back to number 4 here. So drafting up the existing as-builds, doing design and permit sets, and then discussing with the contractor is another key part here. Because how it works is that, you know, the contractor hasn't seen any plans until now. They've seen the building layout, they visited the property, but now we're getting into the fine details of what needs to be done. The fire separation, all the engineering work, the laundry service that we need to add in. They need to review that before we submit for permits to understand, hey, Henry, is this really the best way we can construct this without breaking the bank, right? Now, I'm fairly confident a lot of times when I'm doing the design that we're trying to save as much money as possible. We're not trying to rejig the entire layout. We're trying to make sure we can keep the existing and maybe just add in laundry in the corner type of thing. I don't want you guys losing money over like a complete re-layout if we don't need to. And a contractor will be there to double check if we don't need it to do anything more, or there's other alternatives we can do there. Most of the time, we're doing everything by the minimum building code standards, so there's not much room. But you never know from a general contractor's point of view, right? This is where your power team comes in handy because everybody sees different things and looking at the same drawing. And then we look at fire code, the same thing. Again, fire separation. We're trying to make sure we have the fire alarm systems in there, everything required for the unit renovations. And keep in mind too, this is where it gets a little bit complex. Is that some cities, even though you're not doing anything in the units that are there, they would want you to upgrade their fire alarm system or fire related items like the smoke alarms and everything related to that. So it could trigger it. We've had that done before in the Niagara region, but not really in the Hamilton region. So it depends on the city.
Kazi has another question, Henry.
Sure.
Kazi, right?
Yeah, most of the time, even the BCN designer, architects, or whoever consultant we engage, whether it's a single family or maybe small size multifamilies. We are going there so fast to get all that measurement done, and we're not actually focusing on quickly spot any sign of asbestos or lead, or perhaps another big areas that I've seen that some of the BCN architect design, I know this is not their mandate, nobody pay attention to the mechanical design aspect of the furnace room. They just want to make the most tightest space for that furnace room. The furnace can't even breathe, depending on the houses. So how quickly some of those, architectural and engineering firm, most of the time they don't hire full-blown engineering firm anyway. So how do you guys normally quickly spot those things so that that would trigger you to do further probing on those areas?
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, yeah, how do we kind of make sure we're not suffocating the service room there? So like what we're doing right now with our team is that we're going on site always with our contractor. That's number one thing. You don't want to just go in with like half your team. You want to make sure the contractors, the designer, everyone is there, electricians, plumbers, because even the contractor might miss things that the plumber and like the electricians might already be aware of. So we bring everyone involved there. And for me, how I kind of document everything is I have the 3D scanner, I have the recording glasses to make sure that whatever we're talking about there, we understand it from that point of view. And we go into review in deep details with our engineer, our HVAC guy, to understand how much space do we really need to reduce for this furnace system, if at all. Maybe we want to get rid of the furnace system completely and do heat pumps all over the place and maybe electric baseboards, right? So there's different solutions there. But normally, how I try to keep it is, we try to minimize that as much as possible. But from my understanding, the rule of thumb is we try to keep a 5x5 room for the mechanical system, not to like suffocate it, but that should be more than enough room to kind of get in there, operate, and maintain that furnace without, being too tight.
Do you guys do fire tight? Like in Kingston, they really want in the sitting space, all the wiring and everything else, everything has to be sealed. It's just like a vacuum they created. Unless you have an older home where you need to breathe in, you need to bring in another intake on that. Otherwise, it's 2-inch pipe in and out. So that's a major issue that City of Kingston had to deal with one of my projects. And the second one, I think I'm just going to get your quick feedback. I know that you guys are focusing on architectural and all that areas, but unless you hire somebody who knows about the asbestos or designated substance, how quickly, as an investor, I want to go there half an hour, quickly check on this while you guys are doing all that building measurement and having the contractor look at it. But how do you, like your team would be able to observe some of the signs for asbestos and lead, some of those materials, basically?
Yeah, so to answer that question, because kind of quick here, there's definitely signs of asbestos on the drywall. And even the tiles itself. So we have a lot of situations where we've seen like those old tiles, I believe 9x9 tiles, that if you see them right away, most of the time it is asbestos. But what we've done in the past is like we don't demolish it. It's only a problem when we start demolishing these walls in asbestos type areas that we have to be concerned of. A lot of times with the floor system itself, because it's tiles and it's like raised up a little bit more than, let's say, the living room, we kind of build up a plywood on the living room side to kind of align properly. And then it's all flush. And then we put in the new floor finish, right? So again, we're not demolishing it. We're just hiding it behind new flooring and making sure it's in line with the rest of the flooring there. With the drywall, it's tough to kind of determine unless you do a little bit of demo, not too much that you're creating all the dust in your face. But we usually try to go inside at least an older unit, demolish a little piece of like the closet space that's not noticeable, and see if it is asbestos or not. Our contractor, again, Taco, he knows a lot about that stuff. It's more of his field than mine, but I've seen a bunch of times that we're able to determine it at first glance. So during the due diligence phase, we can definitely kind of do that for you, as long as the current owner is okay with us doing a little bit of demo. Now, it's another situation if that unit is rented to a different tenant, they wouldn't want us to demo their property or their unit there. But luckily, there are some buildings that we go into, and there's at least one vacancy that we can do whatever we want and understand the systems there, right? Because again, you mentioned we're looking at the architecturals, but for me, I try to look as much as possible from the plumbing side to the architecturals, the furnace, even the heating system, everything to do with a project. Because at the end of the day, I have to review everyone's drawings and see if it all works together before we even make submissions, right? So that's why we try and make our details as clear as possible to the engineers to say, hey, listen, guys, we are doing this type of work. Do not, not that I don't want their feedback, but I also want to make sure like everything's as fast as possible and they understand how the system works there. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to move on to step 5 here. The engineering, which again, it's it's a little confusing. It's a little bit of a struggle. It's a little bit of everything, right? But at the end of the day, we do need these engineers to work together with us and try to understand how the process works, right? So again, I'm not saying anything bad about engineers. It's just a lot of work to kind of absorb at first glance because there's a lot of information there that kind of becomes overwhelming. So definitely myself or even the investors try to take a look at it and see if the engineers are understanding our investment goals, right? We don't want to make sure they're creating something that's going to cost us like an arm and a leg. We don't want to make sure that they're in line with our investment goals and making sure they understand our budgets, right? So we don't need the latest technology. We don't need to do these big ticket items that are going for a duplex conversion. We just need something that is simple and meeting building code standards, right? So a lot of the engineers that we're working with nowadays for the multifamily side is, of course, a structural engineer for any of the new windows, basement walkouts, any of the structure like load bearing walls. Like those are types of like work that they do. The HVAC is, of course, how are you heating the units? Every unit, every space needs to be heated in some sort of capacity. From the heat pumps, electric baseboards, furnace, whatever it is, it needs to be heated. Now, the plumbing is not really required for duplex conversions, but it is a trigger when it comes to 3+ unit conversions. And really, as silly as it sounds, the engineer needs to understand or draw out how the existing plumbing works and how it's being connected to the new plumbing system there, right? Even though at the same time, like we're not doing any work on the existing, we're literally just adding one bathroom and one kitchen. The city still wants a plumbing drawn, stamp off by an engineer. Next is the water line upgrade. Now, this is where it becomes more of a cost because you basically have to tell the city how are you planning to upgrade that line, that plumbing line that supplies water to your building. Because originally, when that building was first built 50, 70, 100 years ago, they didn't assume you're going to make this into multifamily. So that pipeline is like pretty thin. So when we're adding all this plumbing work to the building, now we have to kind of demolish that pipeline and add in a bigger one to accommodate the additional load. Now that's another drawing that we have to submit to city, and again must be stamped by a engineer. Similar to that is a hydro service. Again, was the instead of water, now we have to let the city know about the electrical systems and how that works together with our existing. If we need to increase it, a lot of the houses have 100 amps. A lot of people, I'm sure you guys know, duplexes need 200 amps, right? The minimum for each unit is about 60 amp per space. Even for my own triplex, I have 200 amps and I can get away with doing 60, 60, 80, I believe. I think that's what I have it at. But again, trying to let the city know how we're upgrading the electrical system. And then lastly is the fire alarm system, which is it's a new one that the cities are enforcing nowadays than ever before. Really, by code, you have to have a fire alarm system if the building exceeds 3 stories, and that includes the basement. So I'll give you an example. One of our projects has it, but in the next page. But I'll explain it a little bit here. You have a basement, 2 stories plus an attic. That's technically 4 stories by definition. If that attic space is being used as a unit, keep in mind of. So now you need a fire alarm plan because it goes over 3 stories. Okay. Additionally, if you're going over 10 occupancy, which every bedroom is technically 2 people. So if you go over 5 bedrooms, now you need fire alarm systems. Which again, if you can imagine, these are the exit signs. These are like the fire extinguishers. These are all the little things that you see in commercial buildings. Now they're being applied to your small little triplex. It's a lot more money, a lot more effort for something that's only like 3 units, but it is by code. If you exceed the height or you exceed the occupancy load, you need to do. Okay, so now we're moving on to the last part here. So just a recap, you find a deal, you know the zoning, you ran the numbers, you done the drawings, you dealt with the engineers, you almost have everything ready, you submit for permits, and now that whole issue was the city and you've resolved everything. Now you have approvals and construction, right? You have different options here. You can either have the contractors re-review the numbers now that the city has gotten a chance to look at it over. Sometimes the city adds in things into the project that you didn't assume at the start because now the city wants you to add a few more items that weren't there and it's going to affect your hard costs. Or we can do is with the approved plans, you can just sell the building as is with the approved plans and have somebody else deal with the construction work if the numbers don't make sense to you. Because let's say, for example, you ran the numbers again, it goes over budgets by like, let's say 50,000, 100,000, whatever it is. You don't have the funds for it, or you don't want to do it anymore. You can sell it to another investor, or sell it to somebody else who may be able to take on that extra fee, or has their own, let's say, construction firm who's able to take on that project at a lower rate. You don't know, but it is a different option out there if you don't want to take on that project. And then the third thing is, of course, when if you're deciding to do the project itself, you can start marketing the units, right? A lot of times our investors, they're trying to get the in and out within like 3-6 months, but at the same time, they're trying to get the tenants in at the final stage, right? When the unit's like 90% done, a lot of investors will now start marketing it. But by then, it's like now they're waiting an extra month or two before to get a qualified tenant in there. Okay. But why wait until it's 90% when we can show the potential tenants the layout, how big it's going to be, and even a virtual tour of what it was into what it's going to be, right? That's why finishing the first unit is so important when you're doing these multi-unit conversions. So the tenants understand your style, understand what they're going to get, and you can make that even into your own virtual tour. So what I mean by that is a lot of investors have their own styles of renovating a unit, from maybe an accent wall or the way they buy the fixtures or how their kitchen is set up. So they'll always have that one unit in somewhere in around their buildings to do a virtual tour or even a staging room where they show potential tenants, hey, listen, this project's only 40% done, but here's how it's going to look like. So then they're confident that whatever they're going to rent, by the time it's done, it's going to look like the finished product that they saw. Right. So there's different options there. We're just trying to speed up the process and try and get you guys a tenant. As soon as construction is done, that very next day, tenants should be moving in. That's the goal. So that's pretty much the 6 steps value add there. I know it's a little oversimplified there, but of course, if you have any questions, let me know, and we can definitely run through a couple different scenarios in your specific case.
Yeah. So a quick check for people. Any questions before, Henry will proceed for the project conversion example, or anything from the 6 steps? What was the takeaway that you like to share, or anything? Feel free to, share with Henry.
Yeah, if I may jump in,
Yeah.
by the way, you did a fantastic job. I mean, you simplified to that, to the level that any investors will see it, that the bigger scheme of thing on this one here,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it doesn't have to be so complex. You made it a lot more approachable, and a lot
Yes.
more things that you actually condense it, which is great. I mean, the flow that you've gone through, it's the kind of flow that many of us, we are following this one. I appreciated that. You made a very simplified
Yeah.
form of that. Thank you.
Yeah, and absolutely right, Kazi. Like, it's like a roadmap. Like if you have to do like a value add, and it's always helps, when you have that guiding lights.
Yeah.
So agreed.
I think Akshay has a question, Sumit.
Yeah, Akshay, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just have one question to Henry. So how much, how many steps does it change when there is a mix of residential and commercial units in it? Are there any additional things we should be looking at as part of our initial due diligence?
Yeah, and we can definitely take a look at that in the next slide. I have an example here with one of our mixed unit buildings. I can definitely get into more. But in terms of, just to give you a quick feedback, there's not that many differences. We're currently working right now on a mixed use building that we're converting the commercial space into residential suites. And really the only difference is there's higher ceilings. We have to add in a little bit more of the furnace systems there, because of course the commercial space was designed a lot different than the residential area. So more plumbing, more HVAC systems, fire separations between the two areas is a lot more intense than if it was residential to residential. So it's a little bit more work. It's the same principles is what I tell people, but it's a little bit more work. Like multiply that by 1.5. That's what I typically tell people. But it's not like there's some sort of magic little thing that's going to make or break that deal. It's just, okay, now we have to add things that weren't originally there, right? Like when you go to like a commercial retail store in a downtown area, they have things in there that, they don't have a properly functional bathroom. They don't have HVAC systems all over the place. They have it in central areas that are not accommodated to a certain bedroom area. So definitely it depends on how you're planning to lay out that unit. It's going to affect how your engineering stuff is going to work out. But overall, it's not too complicated that you need something extra. It's just more work.
Okay.
I know it's like kind of vague. I know it's kind of vague, but we'll get into more details once I get into that slide here.
No, but I think it was important to know that there's nothing as such like, we should be specifically looking at. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to hear. Thanks for sharing that.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions before we move on? Again, you can save your questions for the end too, but just because it's so fresh in your head, maybe I can answer them now, then later.
Yeah, one quick question from my side,
Sure.
Henry. This is Bharat. I just wanted to know, like, if we have enough land behind the multifamily which we are going to construct, right? So can we construct one more multifamily behind a multifamily which we are going to construct?
So yes, that's a good question. It depends on the land there, but typically we haven't seen a situation where we want to put two buildings on the same lot. How the city usually interprets that is that we have to severance the property. So it's a massive land. You would have to severance it through a minor variance. And then with that severance area, then you would build a new building. So technically one building per land, right? Or in a rare case, if you do want to put two buildings on the same land, we would have to check the building footprint because you don't want to cover like 80% of your lot with buildings. The city has guidelines towards that. A lot of times it's like 30-40% of the lot should be buildings. The rest of it should be for the landscaping and parking areas. So it's nearly, I wouldn't say impossible, but it's quite challenging to add that much buildings footprint into one piece of land there.
Okay. It again depends upon the city guidelines, right?
Every city is a little bit different, but usually the rule of thumb I tend to go with is like 40%, right? So if you have 10,000 square feet, only 4,000 should be building footprint. The rest of the 6,000 should be for the parking and landscaping, right? That being said, again, I've dealt with multiple cities that have a little bit of a different, like that's where the fine print is. This is where, as vague as my answers are, this is where we go a deeper dive into the zoning bylaws and see, okay, maybe it's not 40%. What if we do A, B or C different strategy that we can get away with 60% if we do certain items on our list, right? So it is open to discussion and even open for a site plan consultation. So a lot of times, even with the new land developments we're doing right now, it's that we're not following the zoning guidelines to the T. We are going into a zoning consultation with them, knowing they're going to say no, but at least they're open to compromise in the space. So maybe they would only allow us 40% and we're going in 70%. We can compromise on trying to make it 55% at the end of the day. So they are open to that. Just keep that in mind. It's not really set in stone. You just have to have a good team trying to confirm that this increase in density or increase in building space isn't going to break the neighborhood quality there.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Henry.
Perfect. Okay. So from there, we can move on to the multifamily conversion examples here that I'm pretty sure you guys have taken a good look at by now. But these are some of the example projects that we're dealing with. Number one example I want to kind of show you guys is a typical house in Hamilton where we have, the ground floor level, the second floor level, and a lot of times in Hamilton, we have high attic spaces where it's being converted into the fourth unit. So this type of building that you see in the downtown areas, it's more than possible to actually make into 4 units. The one thing I want you guys to kind of take away from this is that the difficult part in doing these multifamily conversions is the number of exits. And there's another slide about that, but I want you guys to get a visual example here that you have two options with multifamily. Either all the units need to have their own dedicated exit way from their unit to the outside, or if they're all going to be sharing a common stairway, like in a normal apartment building. In a normal apartment building, you have 2 different stairways going from opposite sides of the building. That's the same example you would have to propose here for these multifamily. So you have to have a stairway in the front or stairway in the back, and then have them both shared with all the units. But you can imagine trying to do that sort of example into a building like this isn't really feasible. So a lot of times our strategy is to make every single unit have their own exit way without going through another unit or being shared with another unit. So in this case here, the first one on the top left, we have the basement unit from the side entry door. We have the second floor unit being accessed from this main door here. The main floor unit is being accessed from the backyard patio door. And then the attic space is usually we have to build a new wood stairway on the backside of the property to access that attic unit. So keep that in mind. Every unit should have its own dedicated exits. It's going to cost a bit of an arm and a leg for that attic unit stairway. But luckily, there are buildings out there that already have the stairway to the attic space, maybe from the last owners or when it was originally built. But I'm starting to see a lot more of those on the market. And as soon as I see that, right away, I think of fourth unit all day long. So keep that in mind there. And then we have what's another common property motto is a lot of these back splits. So I know a lot of people aren't a big fan of these back splits buildings because it seems so awkward. But we're working on them actually right now, a couple of them. And as awkward as it looks, you can still get away with multi-unit conversions. In a sample here, we have the main floor and the upper, raise level here to be part of one unit. And then the two lower units, because it's a 4 back split building, will be the basement unit. The garage that's attached to the building is completely separate. I can't go from this side of the building into the garage. So the garage can be its own separate unit there. And then optional, we can build above the garage a fourth unit, right? So there are different examples here that can really work well for you. It just depends on how creative your team is, right? And the cost to it. Because believe me, when you're doing additions for a property, it's a lot more money than what you expected it is. Like normally, what was it? 1,000 square foot was going to cost you like 300,000, give or take 250. Which, when you run the numbers, it might not make sense to do an addition versus, let's say, if you want to do a garden suite, right? So again, you have to pick and choose your battles there and see what the cost difference is going to be for that. And here, the next slide, we're going to talk about things that I look over when I'm looking at your property or looking at any property that I'm willing to buy as well. The room size is the difficult part. So a lot of our investors are buying buildings that are, multifamily buildings that are already done, but some of the units are illegal. Okay. The owners maybe, makeshift the units back 15 years ago, 20 years ago, whenever they did it. But when I measure it or I scan it, the room sizes are not meeting today's code. So now, in order to legalize it, we have to kind of tear it all down and rebuild it. Worst case. Best case, maybe it's off by a few square footage and we can just move the wall a few inches. That's all, right? But room size is so important because there is a minimum standard to that, especially when you're going for building permits. The city is going to be on top of that room area size right away. Next is the exit and egress. We already talked about that. You need one exit per unit or 2 shared exit ways. Fire and sound is where some investors, they think they know a lot about that, which they do, honestly. But the one thing they're missing is the sound insulation. So today's building code, how it works is that, yes, you have to have fire separation, but you also have to make sure it has sound insulation as well. It needs to meet the minimum 50 STC rating. And the only way to achieve that is by adding like resilient channels and like material wool insulation is what they call it. So even though it has to be fire rated, it's got to be sound rated to meet today's code. Now, the thing with a city is that, for example, if you buy a building that has a finished basement, sometimes they won't force you to do the sound insulation. Sometimes they will. I like to assume the worst and put in the sound insulation there for permits. And then we'll set up a meeting with the building inspector on site to say, hey, listen, I know we put this on the drawings. I know it's been approved, but can we not do it for this building because it's existing? And the inspector will tell you yes or no to that, right? Majority of the time, they want to follow the book, and the book says to do sound insulation, but sometimes they understand, okay, Henry, you have a finished ceiling, you have a finished wall. I'm not going to push you to do it, right? So it's really a 50-50 chance at that point. The next thing we're going to talk about, which is one of the greatest things you have to look into when you're buying the building, is the ceiling height. And here's why it's so important. Number one thing is a duplex conversion, you can get away with 6 feet 5 inches from the floor to the ceiling. But when it comes to like these multi-unit conversions, like 3 units or more, it jumps up to like 6'11". So imagine how difficult it is finding a house or a small building that has already 6'5". But if you want to add a basement unit, in that case, it has to be minimum 6'11" from floor to finished ceiling. A lot of investors are making the mistake of going inside the unfinished basement and measuring from the floor to the joist system. And to that, it's like, oh, Henry, I have 6'11". But when you add in the resilient channels, the drywall, the finished floor, it now becomes like 6'8". So now we're not meeting building code anymore. So now we're really in trouble there. So I like to tell people add 3 more inches to that. So now instead of looking for 6'11", you are looking for like 7'2" in a way, right? So keep that in mind for some of your projects. One other technical thing, maybe it might be too much, but if you're looking at the bulkheads or drop wood beams inside a basement unit, the minimum is 6'5" for multifamily. But for duplex, and again, I'll speak more on the duplex tomorrow because I have another live talking about that. But for duplexes in Hamilton, they've allowed 6'1" as per the National Building Code. So a lot of times the city will try to refer back to the National Building Code because that's how Ontario Building Code was developed too. So it could be an argument can be made there that, listen, guys, I know you have a rule about 6'5", but the National Building Code allows us 6'1". Can we get away with that? And then at that point, it depends on the building chief official, the head honcho at that city, to agree or disagree with you. The next one is natural lighting, which I'm sure a lot of investors are already familiar with. A lot of the basement units or even the attic units, when they're looking to buy that, is too small in terms of natural lighting, and we have to increase that. Now, what the difficult part in understanding that is that it reflects on your room area. So you have a really big bedroom, but a really small window, that's not going to cut it. So you have to expand your window to meet the same sort of like ratio with the bedroom. So what I mean by that is if you have a 100 square foot bedroom and it's an existing building, you have to do 2.5% of that room area to the windows. So 2.5% glazing area, natural light requirements there. So it's a little bit of a math trick there, but once you start doing it, you'll kind of understand where you have to go. The tricky part with these natural lights in basements and attic spaces is like the egress window, which, keep this in mind for some of you guys who are already doing duplexes, is that the egress window counts as a secondary exit for duplex conversions. But for 3 units and more, the city doesn't count it anymore. It's not part of it. They want you to have an actual walkout if you're planning to do 2 exit routes. So you still need egress in the basement bedroom, but it just doesn't count as a second exit anymore.
Oh man, that's so insightful, man. I never knew that, Randy. Thanks for that. That's good.
Yeah, because we've had a lot of feedback from the city on that, and that kind of like caused some issues. Like they want us to build a brand new basement walkout for the second exit.
Yeah.
And imagine telling an investor you have to spend an extra $50,000 on that. So fortunately, with some of our projects at that time, we were able to convince the city that we're using a dedicated exit.
Yeah.
And that's their own primary one. I don't know why they would allow that, because technically it only has one exit route.
Right.
But again, at the end of the day, we're following their standards there. Like the building code, keep in mind, it's not, doesn't make sense sometimes, right? So it's
I know that. Sorry, I think Kazi has to leave in a couple of minutes. And Kazi, you still have your hands up. I just want to make sure you get a question.
He has a question. Yes.
I'm sorry, guy. I was going to leave. I have a badminton session, but I got so much soaked into this content.
Amazing.
I stay a little longer here, but one comment I have on your sound. City of Kingston does allow 5/8 drywall put onto the existing drywall if you have it, but if you already have exposed ceiling area, they will definitely want you to do the 6-inch insulation with the resilient channel and then 5/8 drywall on top of it. I think a number of my properties have done it exactly the way that it doesn't matter if you have to just add 5/8 drywall. I did actually more than that. One unit I just did halfway through because city still allowed me to do it because of that existing ceiling is has the drywall. My goodness, the kind of issues that I'm dealing with, especially with the noise, it's just great investment. Just take that time, take that ceiling down, put $3,000 worth of stuff in there. It's gonna save you a lot of aggravations. That's just my couple of lessons learned, basically. I thought I was just going to share with you guys,
No, I agree 100%. In terms of sound, I'd rather do all of it. And
Yep.
to that point, when I did my triplex in Welland a year and a half ago, I only had half the ceiling removed, but the
Yes.
inspector still enforced that to kind of remove it all and put in sound insulation. So he said if it was like 20%, 15% of the ceiling removed, he wouldn't be as tough. But since half of it was already gone, he's like, might as well get rid of the other half and do the proper
Yep.
work. So again, it depends on how you're constructing that, but I strongly suggest doing sound insulation. And even we are experimenting with sono pans. So for those of you
Yes.
who know what sono pans are, the green type of like drywall there, we are adding that to our stairs assembly and our ceiling assembly. But yeah, a lot of times the sound comes from the stairs as well. You're coming up and down the stairs from a different unit. You can hear it in your unit. The tough part right now is dealing with the ductwork, because you can do all the soundproofing as much as you want, but if you have this existing ductwork still there, you'll still hear a bunch of things. So for me, at least personally, I took out my furnace system and put heat pumps in all my units, so I have no ductwork in my triplex right now. Right now, of course, I ran the numbers, and the numbers made sense, because for a new furnace it was going to cost 9,000. For 3 heat pumps, it was going to cost 9,000 or a little bit higher. But at least I got rid of ductwork, and my basement has a finished flat ceiling perfectly there. I have no ductwork, no bulkheads.
Amazing. Thanks, Henry. Much appreciated. Again, thanks, Jason. Shimon and everyone.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Take care. Hey, all the
Take
best.
care, guys.
Take care.
Thanks,
Thanks. Bye.
Kazi, for joining.
Bye. Bye then.
Yeah.
Sorry, does someone else have a question here?
I think Akshay has.
Actually, I had this question. Yeah.
Yeah. Akshay, do you still have a question, or? No, I think
he forgot to put down his hand before.
Yeah, he put down his hand. Yeah, I think he's correct.
Okay.
Huh?
Okay. So we'll continue on here. The last part here, the information is laundry service. So understand that with the new building codes type of situation is that we're going to need laundry service for every unit. Now you have two options here. You can either put all the laundry service inside the unit itself, like a private laundry closet. And we usually put that beside the existing bathroom. So a lot of these buildings we're buying, they have a closet right beside the bathroom, and we'll just convert that into a laundry closet, which is pretty simple. Sometimes we have to add it beside the kitchen because there's not a closet beside the bathroom, which is not a big problem. The biggest problem is that sometimes our investors want to add a common laundry room into the building, and because they want to save on costs on all the laundry, they don't want to add 3 or 4 different laundry service for all the units. They want to have one common laundry room. And the biggest pain point here, because it's very complex, even to me, to my understanding as well, is that if you do a common laundry room, it cannot be in the way of an exit. So what I mean by that is you can't have it in the middle of the building or even beside the building near the exit route, because the theory is in case somebody's doing laundry and they leave the door open, right? You know, when people are escaping the property, they're going to hit their heads on the door, and it's going to be an obstacle in the way of the fire route. So the city has not allowed, any city, it's Ontario Building Code, they do not allow the laundry room as part anywhere near the exit route, which is tough because where else could we possibly put it? If we put it in the basement, now the basement doesn't have a dedicated exit way. And so now that's going to be an issue for building a new walkout. We can't put it on the ground floor because now that's in the way of an exit route. So we've been very creative in how to kind of address this. We've had to put laundry service inside a closet, inside a hallway, inside a public corridor. So imagine going inside a public corridor, like a massive hallway, turning left into another hallway, and then finding a closet space there for a washer dryer machine. So you basically have to hide it within a room of another room, which it all has to be fire rated too. So it's a very complex situation there. And at the end of the day, the money you're trying to save on adding 4 laundry service is now being spent into fire rated service there, or fire rated walls in that case. So we've experimented with that, and I'm not a big fan of it because of the cost doesn't make much difference. So I'd rather have you guys kind of add laundry service into the unit itself, because number one thing is it's going to increase your rent potential as well. Private laundry, everyone's going to want that. They don't want to share laundry with their neighbors because of hygienic reasons, and they want to have their own laundry service to themselves, right? So keep that in mind. Either common or private laundry service, one or the other, you have to choose, and that's by building code. So now we're going to move on to the big ticket item here tonight is the 5 to 8 unit conversion project. And I think some of you were there on the site a few weeks ago. I know Suman was there, right? So you've seen this building before. It's got potential. It originally was a 5-unit, 1 commercial unit on the ground floor here, and then 2 residentials on the middle floor, and then 2 residentials on the top floor. So it's a very traditional, typical downtown mixed-use building that we bought about a year ago, and now we're slowly converting into 8 units here, 8 residential units. So 3 on the main, 2 on the ground, and 3 on the top floor. The very special key part of this project is the fact that our ceilings are so high up in the attic space, we have enough to do like a mezzanine or loft area there. So now my team and I are debating over doing like some sort of Airbnb up there.
Nice.
But that's beside the point. But I just want to bring it up that you can mix your game plan there. It can be like half of it can be long-term tenants, and then half of them can be Airbnb. Your options are there for you. The basement, just in case anybody's wondering, was too low in terms of ceiling height, and we didn't want to spend too much money on underpinning for this rather small project that we're working on. So that's the one reason there. In terms of residential to commercial conversion itself, I know somebody had a question about that. Yeah, the commercial space was sort of empty, and what I mean by that, it's more of it was gutted. There was nothing really there. It was a very old building. I don't think it was being taken care of for a bit of a long time. But we have to add in new ductwork. We have to add in new plumbing into the commercial space, because again, the idea is these existing commercial retail space did not have the proper plumbing. They probably only had 1 bathroom in the whole floor. So now when we want to divide it up into 3 residential units, we're going to have to do more plumbing work for all the bathrooms and kitchens and laundry service. The HVAC system was only meant to be distributed as a wide area. So when you go to like Walmart or like Winners or something, you'll see the HVAC system above in those blocks, and they're meant to be more of an open space concept versus a room. So when we're doing our ductwork here, it's going to be their own supply grill in every single room versus the ones that you see in commercial space, right? And then of course, because it's all blank canvas here, we had to add all the typical fire separations for every single unit. So again, it's not as complicated as what some people would assume. It's just more work of the same principles is what I call it there. So now we're going to move on a little bit to the last part of the presentation here. So how it usually works is that right now I've already developed a checklist for these multi-unit conversions, 3+ unit conversions in Ontario. And a lot of the things from this presentations are in this booklet. Again, this information is free for anybody. I'm not trying to make money off here. I'm just trying to educate the public on how difficult it is to do multifamily conversions and all the things you need to look at from the heritage zoning perspective to construction to the building code and even the HVAC plumbing systems. They're all here. So it's a one-step guide to how to do your projects there. Next, I'd like to offer you guys even a property tour. We have some buildings right now that we're working on in Hamilton that if you guys are interested or local or nearby, you can always send me a DM, message me, or call me. Say, Henry, are you in Hamilton today? You want to check out one of our buildings? We can definitely set that up. Or if you want to increase your kind of knowledge and go into the bigger buildings, we would set something up with Taco and his team as well. And then lastly, if anybody wants to reach me, I'm available from Instagram, phone calls, emails, whatever it is. I'm the type of guy who just responds really quickly, because if I don't respond to you today, I'm probably going to forget about it throughout the week. So, but thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate the invite here, and hopefully I brought some value into your community here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I learned a lot of things in spite of doing, so many transactions. And I think Jason also vouched for it. I think he mentioned one time.
I personally am, I was saddened that I couldn't go on that property tour that Suman did with you, Henry.
Yeah.
But, you let me know. I'm on the next bus. I don't know if there's a bus or not, but I'll be there.
Well, you let me know. But if you're in Hamilton one day, I will let you. I have an office there, so we can definitely take a lunch and check that property out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So folks, though if you are around Hamilton or want to go for a property tour, in fact, Infin8 and Grow are collaborators, and we are planning some more continued events, property tour for you guys. But along with that, if you guys also want to go, definitely message Henry, and he can arrange something for you guys.
100%. Perfect.
So, any questions, folks? How was the thing? I'm already seeing messages for you, Henry. Great presentation. Thank you, Henry. I think everyone enjoyed a lot.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much, Henry, for taking out the time.
It's
Not a problem.
Henry, all I ask is if you ever get your friend to convince you to start something in Calgary, let us know. So
Yes, I have
Yeah,
told it to
100%.
Taco as well.
I think
Yeah, I
Sam
think
has a question, by the way. I don't want to miss that.
Yes,
Simon.
Sandhu, please go ahead.
Yeah, he has a question.
Yeah, it's a great presentation, Henry. Thank you, Jason and Simon. So this is regarding the MLA select. So if the property has like 3 units in one under one roof and 2 units under one roof, like will it still be considered as under MLA select?
sorry, if it has three units under one roof and 2 units in a different
Like
roof.
yeah, like a detached ADU.
Oh, so there's 5 units on the lot.
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
lot.
So
Okay.
okay, from my understanding, with the mortgage guys on their side, they're saying they do it based on lots, not based on building. So if you do have 5 units on the lot, they would still put as CHMC financing and an MI select program. They would still allow that. They
Another,
don't necessarily have to be underneath the same building.
yeah,
Oh,
another, Sandhu, just to answer is mostly the MLI usually plays a better role if you have like $1 million kind of financing and all. Like not a thumb rule, but a general thing what I've heard from some of the commercial brokers. So that is another point for you to consider.
okay, so thanks.
The dollar amount, right?
Yes, dollar amount, correct.
Yep. See, I'm just looking through here. Any other questions? I think most of it, Henry, has been just like positive feedback. It's such a enlightening the complexity. You know what? Kazi mentioned it earlier before he left. The way you've simplified every step is
Yes.
crazy, and that checklist there is such a great framework. So I thank you. It's great. Once I get to go my first property tour with you, I'd love to like go through every step and actually see it in person, because for me personally, I need to actually be there to experience it. I mean, I can see the slides, so it's good to see what you're doing.
No, 100%. And even I've been in talks with Taco about even doing virtual tours.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we're going to set up like a camera there and like trying to get the virtual tour every few
Right.
weeks to see like the process. So I can show you on the virtual side how it looks like gutted, how it looks like framing, how it looks like finish. So you guys have a better
Right.
understanding from your computer to see how it works.
That's amazing. And Bruno is saying he has got so much value from this presentation. Thank you, Henry.
Well,
Yeah.
it's great having a room full of people who understands the multifamily a little bit,
Yeah.
right? So, but even for the guys here who are doing duplex conversions, just a little bit of information there. I am doing a live tomorrow on the Grow platform. We have one of our investors there who is doing a duplex conversion, but she's having trouble with her current designer. So what I offer her is that we're going to do online consultation on live to see how I can help her and point out things for a duplex conversion that she should be aware of before she even submits for permits, right? So she hired somebody who wasn't really too familiar with duplex conversions. And then when she showed me the drawings, I told her there's a couple more information you should add so we can avoid a lot back and forth with the city. Again, I'm not trying to bash any of the designers or whatever. I'm trying to help educate people into like what they need to add to their drawings, because if I don't point it out, the city's going to point it out. And why are you going to waste that time? I can help you right now and do a live to educate everybody. So if you guys are interested in that duplex discussion, please feel free to kind of hop in. It's a free event. I'm just there to help people out there in understanding.
Awesome. That's amazing. So yeah, folks, definitely reach out to Henry, be in touch. He's an amazing guy. And, if you are interested, go for the live session. It's in the Discord Grow community. And let's continue to learn and grow together.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Henry, you're good with we recorded the sessions, all right? If we just share with the community.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Amazing.
Perfect.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Right. Thanks so much, Henry. Appreciate your time. And I think Suman, would you like to do the group Q&A after release here? Stay on the same Zoom link?
Yeah, we can do it in the same, but yeah, and Henry, I think we just usually do a quick infinite kind of Q&A apart from the topic. So feel free to drop by, and really thank you so much for coming as a guest speaker.
All right. Sounds good, guys. Appreciate it. And hope to
Enjoy.
talk to you soon again, Suman. All right.
Yes.
Sounds
Take
good.
care.
All
Bye.
right. Take care,
Bye.
guys.
Henry,
Yeah.
see ya. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye. So, folks, this is now the Infinite Q&A sessions where
Yeah,
feel
this
free
is
to ask
an advanced Q&A session, I think.
advanced Q&A sessions. Exactly. So these are the advanced members access only.
Yep.
So it's not open for all Infinite members. So these are the exclusive sessions.
I have to go to my tennis game soon, so
Yes.
just like, I think Kazi and I need to start a racket club or something for Infinite Racket Club or something.
Right. And just a quick feedback from everyone, like
Yeah.
maybe I4 and I thought to start with you, like how is the session and overall, like, and I think let me stop the recording.